The glint of sunlight off the water was the last thing Amelia Evans saw before her gondola lurched violently, sending her tumbling toward Venice's murky canal waters. A sickening crack had preceded the motion, the ornate vessel splitting beneath her feet as though made of nothing more substantial than parchment. In the chaos, she barely registered the strong arms that suddenly wrapped around her waist, pulling her from the sinking wreckage. "I've got you," a deep voice assured as she found herself hauled onto a passing water taxi. Coughing and disoriented, Amelia blinked water from her eyes and found herself staring into the most intense blue gaze she'd ever encountered. "Thank you," she sputtered, pushing soaked auburn hair from her face. "I don't know what happened. One minute I was enjoying the tour and the next." "Faulty construction, likely," the man replied, his Italian accent barely detectable beneath polished English. "These discount gondola companies are cutting corners everywhere." He handed her a handkerchief, an actual cloth handkerchief, monogrammed with the initials FB. Only then did Amelia truly take in her rescuer. Tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair swept back from a face that seemed more suited to a Renaissance painting than a modern man. His suit, now soaked through, was clearly bespoke, the kind that cost more than her monthly rent. "Forgive me," he said, noticing her appraisal. "Flynn Benetti." "And you are Amelia Evans," she replied automatically, still clutching his handkerchief. "I'm so sorry about your suit." Flynn Benetti waved his hand dismissively. "A small price to pay. I couldn't very well watch a beautiful woman drown in the Grand Canal, now could I?" The boat driver cleared his throat, reminding them of his presence as they approached the nearest dock. Flynn spoke rapidly to him in Italian, handing over what appeared to be several large bills. "Where are you staying?" Flynn asked her. "I've asked him to wait." "The least I can do is see you safely back to your hotel." "The Locanda Orciolo," Amelia answered, suddenly conscious of her bedraggled appearance, and the fact that her small hotel, while charming, was hardly the five-star accommodation someone like Flynn Benetti likely frequented. If he thought anything of it, Flynn didn't show it. Not far. Charming place, actually. As the water taxi glided through the smaller canals, Amelia found her voice again. "So, do you make a habit of rescuing drowning tourists, Mr. Benetti? Flynn, please. And know this is actually a first for me." His smile transformed his face from merely handsome to devastating. "Usually, I'm stuck in boardrooms, not patrolling the canals for damsels in distress." "Boardrooms?" Amelia questioned, wringing water from her sleeve. "I run Benetti Glassworks," he replied, his tone casual, as though he hadn't just revealed himself as the CEO of one of Venice's most prestigious glass manufacturing companies, an empire that had been modernized and expanded globally under his leadership, if she remembered correctly from her pre-trip research. Amelia's eyes widened. "The Benetti Glassworks, with the showroom on Murano. I was planning to visit tomorrow, actually." "Then perhaps this unfortunate accident was fate," Flynn said, his eyes warming. "Allow me to personally show you our collection." "It's the least I can do after your gondola adventure went so terribly wrong." Before Amelia could respond, they arrived at the small dock near her hotel. Flynn stepped out first, then extended his hand to help her. His grip was firm, steady, much like the man himself seemed to be. "Tomorrow, then." "Say 10 o'clock. I'll send a private boat to collect you." Amelia hesitated only briefly. She was on vacation, after all, her first real break since starting her job as an art history professor at Boston University. A private tour of Benetti Glassworks with its enigmatic CEO seemed too good an opportunity to pass up. 10 o'clock, she agreed, surprised at the flutter of anticipation in her stomach. "I'll be ready." Flynn smiled, lifting her hand to brush his lips against her knuckles in a gesture that seemed both old-fashioned and entirely natural coming from him. "Until tomorrow, Amelia Evans." As she watched him return to the water taxi, Amelia couldn't help but wonder if her disastrous gondola ride had somehow veered her vacation in an unexpected and potentially wonderful new direction. The next morning, Amelia woke early, nerves and excitement battling for dominance as she contemplated her wardrobe. She settled on a blue sundress that complemented her green eyes and auburn hair, practical enough for touring a glass factory but pretty enough for what? A date. Was this a date? At precisely 10 o'clock, she was waiting at the hotel's water entrance when an elegant wooden boat approached. Unlike the tourist-filled water taxis, this was clearly a private vessel, gleaming with polished wood and brass fittings. Flynn stood at its bow, looking impeccable in casual linen trousers and a crisp white shirt, his skin tan against the fabric. "Good morning," he called, extending his hand to help her aboard. "You look recovered from yesterday's adventure." "Amazing what dry clothes can do," Amelia replied with a smile, settling onto the cushioned seat. "This is quite the transportation upgrade from my sinking gondola." Flynn laughed, a rich sound that seemed to vibrate through the air between them. "A family perk. Benettis have been crossing these waters for generations." As they cruised toward Murano, Flynn pointed out landmarks and shared stories of Venice that weren't in any guidebook, tales of glass artisans smuggling their secrets, of rivalries between ancient families, of the complex relationship between the city and its glassmaking heritage. "You know," Amelia said, "for someone who claims to spend most of his time in boardrooms, you have a remarkable knowledge of Venetian history." Flynn's expression softened. "When you inherit something with roots this deep, you make it your business to understand its foundation. My father insisted on it, said I couldn't possibly lead Benetti into the future if I didn't honor its past." "That's beautiful," Amelia said sincerely. "Many businesses lose that connection to their heritage." "And what about you? What brings an American professor to Venice alone?" Amelia raised an eyebrow. "How did you know I'm a professor?" Flynn had the grace to look slightly embarrassed. "I may have looked you up. Professional habit, I like to know who I'm dealing with. "Is that what this is?" Amelia teased. "Poor choice of words," he admitted. "I was curious about the woman I pulled from the canal. Sue me for wanting to know if you were someone worth knowing better." "And your verdict?" "Assistant professor of art history at Boston University, specializing in Renaissance glass and decorative arts. Published in 3 major journals. Guest lecturer at the Met last fall." Flynn listed her credentials with a slight smile. "I'd say you're exactly the kind of person I should be showing around Benetti Glassworks." They arrived at Murano, the island known worldwide for its glass production. Unlike the tourists disembarking from public boats, Flynn led Amelia through a private entrance at the back of the Benetti facility. "We'll start with the museum," he said, guiding her through a door that required both a key and a security code. "Some of these pieces never go on public display." The museum was breathtaking, case after case of exquisite glasswork spanning centuries, from Roman-era vessels to Renaissance goblets to modern sculptures that defied understanding of what glass could do. "This is extraordinary," Amelia breathed, leaning close to examine a particularly delicate 15th-century goblet. "The documentation on this piece alone would be worth a research paper." Flynn watched her with undisguised pleasure. "Most visitors see pretty objects. You see history, technique, cultural significance." "Hazard of the profession," she replied, but couldn't help feeling warmed by his observation, After the museum, Flynn led her through the workshops where master glassblowers transformed molten material into art before their eyes. Unlike the demonstrations put on for tourists, these were actual production workshops, with artisans creating pieces for Benetti's high-end clients. This workshop produces only about 20 pieces a year, Flynn explained as they watched an elderly man manipulate molten glass with tools that looked centuries old. Enrico has been with us for 52 years. His father worked for my grandfather and his grandfather before that. The knowledge passed down. Amelia marveled. It's living history. Exactly. Flynn's eyes lit up. That's what I'm trying to preserve even as we expand into more contemporary markets. This knowledge, these techniques, they can't be replicated by machines. They spent hours exploring the facility, from the traditional workshops to the more modern design studios where Benetti created contemporary pieces for fashion houses and luxury brands. Throughout, Flynn was greeted with obvious respect, but also genuine warmth from his employees. "They adore you," Amelia observed as they stepped away from a young apprentice Flynn had been encouraging. "I hope they know I adore them," he replied seriously. "Benetti isn't just a company, it's hundreds of families who have entrusted their livelihoods to us for generations." By mid-afternoon, Flynn suggested they break for lunch. Instead of heading to a restaurant, he led her to a private apartment above the showroom, where a simple but elegant meal awaited them on a terrace overlooking the lagoon. "My grandfather's apartment," Flynn explained as he held her chair. "I keep it for days when I need quiet to think, or when I want to impress beautiful art historians." Amelia felt her cheeks warm. "Is that what you're doing, trying to impress me? Is it working?" His blue eyes held hers steadily. "Perhaps," she admitted, accepting the glass of wine he offered. "Though I'm not sure why you'd bother. I'm just a visiting academic, hardly your usual companion, I'd imagine." Flynn's brow furrowed slightly. "And what sort of companion do you imagine I usually have?" Amelia shrugged. "I don't know, models, socialites, fellow industry titans." "You've been reading too many tabloids," he said with a soft laugh. "The reality is far more boring. Work consumes most of my time, and when it doesn't—" He paused. "Let's just say I've found that shared passion is more compelling than shared tax brackets." Their conversation flowed easily through lunch, from art history to travel experiences to books they'd both loved. Flynn was surprisingly well-read for a businessman, and Amelia found herself repeatedly charmed by his insights and genuine curiosity about her work. "I have a confession," he said as they finished their meal. "There's another reason I wanted to bring you here today." "Oh." Amelia's pulse quickened slightly. "We're preparing a special exhibition for our 500th anniversary next year. Renaissance Venetian glass, specifically pieces that demonstrate the exchange of techniques between Venice and the Islamic world." He leaned forward. "Your paper on that very subject is what made me look twice when I saw your name." "You read my paper?" Amelia couldn't hide her surprise. "I did. And I'd like to invite you to consult on our exhibition. Your expertise would be invaluable." That's incredibly flattering, but I'm only here for another week." Flynn's expression remained hopeful. Initial consultations could begin now. The rest could be handled remotely, with perhaps another visit closer to the exhibition opening. Amelia considered the offer. Professionally, it was an incredible opportunity. Personally, well, the prospect of having a reason to see Flynn again was undeniably appealing. "I'd be honored," she said finally. "Excellent." Flynn's smile was boyish in its enthusiasm. "Now, there's one more thing I'd like to show you." He led her to a secure room off the main workshop floor, using another key from the ring he carried. Inside, a single glass-blowing station was set up, with tools arranged precisely on a workbench. "My personal studio," Flynn explained, removing his watch and rolling up his sleeves. "Few people know that the CEO of Benetti Glassworks is also a glassblower himself." Amelia watched, fascinated, as Flynn moved with practiced ease around the studio, lighting the furnace and preparing his tools. "How long have you been doing this?" "Since I was a boy. My father insisted I learn every aspect of the craft before I could run the company. I spent summers apprenticed to our master glassblowers, starting with the most basic tasks and working my way up." For the next hour, Amelia observed as Flynn transformed a glob of molten glass into a delicate flower, a lily with translucent petals that caught the light in ways that seemed to defy physics. "It's beautiful," she said sincerely when he finally set his tools down. "It's yours," Flynn replied, carefully placing the cooled piece in a cushioned box. "A token of appreciation for agreeing to help with our exhibition." The gesture touched her deeply. "Thank you, I'll treasure it." As they made their way back to his boat, the late afternoon sun casting golden light across the lagoon, Flynn turned to her. "Would you have dinner with me tonight? Not as a potential consultant or a rescued tourist, but as a date." Amelia found herself nodding before she'd fully processed the question. "I'd like that. I know a place away from the tourist areas. Simple, authentic Venetian food, nothing fancy." "Sounds perfect," she replied, realizing she meant it. Despite his wealth and position, there was something refreshingly unpretentious about Flynn Benetti. He returned her to her hotel with a promise to collect her at 8, leaving Amelia with just enough time to shower and change into the one nice dress. She'd packed a forest green wrap dress that brought out her eyes. True to his word, Flynn arrived precisely at 8, this time on foot rather than by boat. "The restaurant is just a short walk," he explained, offering his arm. "I thought you might enjoy seeing Venice at night." They strolled through narrow streets and over small bridges, the city transformed by moonlight and the warm glow of windows. Flynn guided her expertly, avoiding the crowds that still thronged the main tourist areas even at night. The restaurant was indeed far from the beaten path, a small establishment tucked into what appeared to be someone's home, with perhaps 10 tables total. The owner greeted Flynn like family, kissing both his cheeks before leading them to a table in a quiet corner. "Mario's grandfather supplied sand to our furnaces," Flynn explained after they'd been seated. "Our families have known each other for generations. I'm beginning to see that Venice is less a city and more a complex web of relationships for you," Amelia observed. Flynn nodded. "That's a perfect way to describe it. These connections, they're what make this place special, what makes it home." Over exquisite seafood pasta and local wine, they shared more of themselves. Amelia told Flynn about growing up in a small Massachusetts town, discovering her love of art history during a high school trip to Italy, and the persistence it had taken to establish herself in academia. Flynn, in turn, spoke of the weight of family legacy, his years studying business at Oxford while simultaneously mastering glassblowing techniques, and his vision for preserving Benetti's heritage while expanding its future. "It can't just be about luxury goods," he said passionately. "That market is fickle. I want to ensure we're creating art that matters, that speaks to our history while finding new ways to be relevant." "That balance is rare in business," Amelia noted. "Most companies choose either tradition or innovation, not both." "Perhaps that's why I found your research so compelling," Flynn replied, his gaze holding hers. "You understand that art doesn't exist in a vacuum, that cultural exchange creates the most interesting innovations." By the time they finished their meal, Amelia felt as though she'd known Flynn for years rather than days. There was an ease between them that defied explanation, a sense of recognition that went beyond their shared professional interests. As they walked back toward her hotel, Flynn tentatively took her hand. "I've enjoyed tonight more than I can express," he said softly. "So have I," Amelia admitted, her fingers intertwining with his. They paused on a small bridge, the moonlight reflecting off the canal below. Without overthinking, Amelia leaned slightly toward him. Flynn needed no further invitation, drawing her close and kissing her with a gentleness that gradually deepened into something more intense. When they finally broke apart, both slightly breathless, Flynn rested his forehead against hers. "I should warn you," he murmured. "I think I may be in danger of falling for you, Amelia Evans." "That's a very bold statement after 2 days," she replied, though her racing heart suggested she might be facing a similar danger. "I'm a decisive man," Flynn said with a small smile. "When I recognize value, I don't hesitate." "Is that what I am? A valuable acquisition?" She kept her tone light, though the question held real concern. Flynn's expression grew serious. "No, you're someone who makes me forget about acquisitions and bottom lines and board meetings. You're someone who reminds me why I do what I do, because beauty and history and connection matter." He kissed her again, more briefly this time, before they continued walking. At her hotel door, Flynn kissed her hand. "Tomorrow is Sunday. The factories are closed. Would you allow me to show you my Venice? Not the tourist version, but the city I know and love." "I'd like that," Amelia said, reluctant to say goodnight. "Then I'll collect you at 9. Wear comfortable shoes, we'll be walking." After he left, Amelia leaned against her hotel room door, trying to make sense of the whirlwind that had become her Venetian vacation. 2 days ago, she'd been a solitary tourist with an itinerary of museums and historical sites. Now she was consulting on a major exhibition, and possibly falling for one of Italy's most eligible bachelors. If it were happening to someone else, she might have scoffed at the fairy tale quality of it all. But there was nothing artificial about Flynn's passion for his craft, or the connection growing between them. Whatever this was, it felt genuine and terrifying in its intensity. The next morning dawned clear and perfect. Flynn arrived wearing casual clothes, jeans, and a polo shirt that somehow looked as sophisticated on him as his suits had. "Ready for a different kind of Venetian experience?" he asked, his eyes bright with anticipation. "Lead the way," Amelia replied, falling into step beside him. Flynn's Venice was indeed different from the one in guidebooks. He took her to small neighborhood churches with extraordinary art that never made it onto tourist itineraries, to markets where locals shopped, to a tiny bookstore specializing in ancient texts where the owner showed Amelia 15th-century manuscripts on glassmaking techniques. "These are incredible," she breathed, carefully turning pages with gloved hands. "I've only seen reproductions of these texts. Giovanni's family has been collecting them for centuries," Flynn explained. "He lets me consult them sometimes when we're researching historical techniques." They ate lunch at a small cafe, where Flynn was greeted with the same warm familiarity he seemed to inspire everywhere. Despite his obvious wealth and status, he moved through the city with a genuine humility that Amelia found deeply attractive. After lunch, he led her to a residential area far from the tourist center. "This might seem strange," he said as they approached a nondescript building, "but I want to show you something important to me." Inside was a community center of sorts, where a dozen or so elderly people were gathered. Flynn greeted them in Italian, introducing Amelia before explaining to her. "This is a program Benetti sponsors teaching traditional crafts to keep the knowledge alive. Today is glass bead making." For the next hour, They sat with the group as two master artisans demonstrated techniques for creating the tiny glass beads that had once been Venice's primary trade good. Flynn participated fully, helping an elderly woman with shaking hands to manage the small torch used to melt the glass. "We record these sessions," he told Amelia quietly, "creating an oral history archive of techniques that might otherwise be lost." "That's remarkable," she replied, genuinely moved by his commitment to preservation. "It's selfish, really," Flynn admitted. "These traditions, these people, they're what give Benetti its soul. Without them, we'd just be another luxury brand." After leaving the community center, they wandered through quiet residential neighborhoods where laundry hung between buildings and children played in small squares. Flynn seemed to know everyone, stopping to chat with fishermen mending nets and nodding to women sweeping their stoops. As afternoon turned to evening, he led her to a secluded spot overlooking the lagoon, away from the crowds. They sat on a stone bench, watching the sunset paint the water in shades of gold and pink. "Thank you for today," Amelia said, leaning slightly against his shoulder. "I've seen a Venice I never would have found on my own." "Thank you for seeing it through fresh eyes," Flynn replied, his arm sliding around her waist. "Sometimes I forget how special this place is until I show it to someone else." The quiet intimacy of the moment emboldened Amelia. "Flynn, what are we doing? I leave in 5 days." He turned to face her, his expression serious. "I don't know exactly. I just know that from the moment I pulled you from that canal, something changed for me, and I'm not ready to let that feeling go just because of geography." "Long-distance relationships are complicated," Amelia pointed out. "Especially between different continents. I have offices in New York," Flynn said. "I'm there at least once a month. Boston isn't far." "You've thought about this," she realized, surprised. "I told you I'm decisive." His smile was warm but held a hint of vulnerability. "I'm not asking for promises, Amelia, just openness to possibilities." She studied his face, this man who had literally pulled her from sinking and now seemed to be offering a lifeline of a different sort. "I can be open to possibilities," she said finally. His kiss was gentle at first, then deeper, filled with a promise that made Amelia's heart race. As the last colors of sunset faded from the sky, she allowed herself to believe, just for a moment, that vacation romances sometimes could become something more. The next few days passed in a blur of dual purpose. During the day, Amelia and Flynn worked together on preliminary plans for the anniversary exhibition, meeting with Benetti's curators and historians, reviewing the company's archives, and identifying key pieces that would tell the story of Venetian Islamic glass exchange. In the evenings, they explored their growing feelings for each other, dining in small restaurants, taking moonlit boat rides through the quieter canals, sharing stories and dreams and increasingly passionate kisses. On Wednesday evening, Flynn took her to the opera at La Venice, Venice's historic opera house. Amelia wore the only formal dress she'd packed, a simple black sheath that she'd brought just in case, while Flynn was resplendent in a tuxedo that made her breath catch when she opened her hotel room door. "You look beautiful," he said, his eyes appreciative as they swept over her. "And you look like you were born to wear a tuxedo," she replied with a smile. At the opera, Amelia noticed the subtle deference paid to Flynn, the best box seats, the attentive service during intermission, the respectful nods from Venice's elite. Yet he wore his status lightly, seeming more interested in gauging her reaction to the performance than in being seen. "Did you enjoy it?" he asked as they strolled back toward her hotel afterward. "It was magnificent," Amelia replied honestly, "though I must admit I was distracted at times." "By what?" She smiled up at him. "By you." by how natural you seem in every environment, from a community center with elderly craftspeople to an opera box with aristocrats. Flynn looked thoughtful. My father taught me that. He said the mark of true worth isn't how you behave when everyone's watching, but how you treat people when nothing's at stake. Your father sounds like a wise man. He was, Flynn said, a shadow crossing his face. He died 3 years ago. Heart attack, completely unexpected. One day he was teaching an apprentice, the next. He shook his head. That's why the preservation programs mean so much to me. He started them. Amelia squeezed his hand. He'd be proud of what you're doing. I hope so, Flynn replied quietly. When they reached her hotel, Flynn didn't leave her at the door as he had previous nights. Instead, he followed her inside, their shared glance acknowledging the shift in their relationship. In her room, words gave way to touches, and they discovered each other with an intensity that left them both breathless. Later, lying in the quiet darkness with Flynn's arms around her, Amelia faced the reality she'd been avoiding. I leave the day after tomorrow. Flynn tightened his hold slightly. I know. I'm scared, she admitted. This feels important, but it's happening so fast. It is important, Flynn said, his voice certain in the darkness. At least to me. To me too, Amelia whispered. That's what scares me. He shifted to face her, his features barely visible in the dim light. We don't have to figure everything out tonight, but I want you to know I'm committed to seeing where this leads, whatever that takes. They spent Amelia's last full day in Venice, finalizing the preliminary exhibition plans in the morning, then escaping to the outlying islands in Flynn's boat for a final afternoon together. On tiny Torcello, away from tourists and responsibilities, they picnicked in the shadow of ancient Byzantine mosaics and allowed themselves to simply be. I have something for you, Flynn said as they sat watching birds swoop over the lagoon. He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small box. Amelia's heart jumped before he added quickly, It's not yet anyway. He opened the box to reveal a delicate glass pendant on a silver chain, a miniature gondola with subtle colors swirling through the glass. I made it myself, he explained, looking uncharacteristically nervous. To remember how we met. It's beautiful, Amelia said, genuinely touched as she lifted her hair to let him fasten it around her neck. I want you to remember, Flynn said quietly, that sometimes accidents lead to the most important discoveries. Their farewell the next morning was painful in its restraint. Flynn had arranged for his private boat to take her to the airport, but business obligations prevented him from accompanying her. This isn't goodbye, he insisted, holding her close on the dock beside her waiting boat. It's just interim planning for our next meeting. Amelia managed a smile despite the tightness in her throat. Very corporate of you. 2 weeks, Flynn said. I'll be in New York for meetings. I can come to Boston afterward. She nodded, not trusting her voice. Until then, he continued, we have phones, email, video calls. He kissed her deeply. And this to remember. The boat ride to the airport felt interminable, Venice receding behind her like a dream. Amelia touched the glass pendant around her neck, wondering if the intense connection she'd formed with Flynn could possibly translate to real life, her lectures and research in Boston, his global business empire based in Venice. Back in Boston, reality reasserted itself quickly. The fall semester was beginning, and Amelia found herself swept up in course preparations, department meetings, and the familiar rhythm of academic life. Yet Flynn remained a constant presence through daily calls, thoughtful texts, and the occasional package Venetian chocolates once, a rare book on glass history another time. True to his word, Flynn arrived in Boston 2 weeks later. Seeing him standing outside her apartment building, looking slightly travel-worn but unmistakably handsome in a casual suit, made Amelia's heart flip in a way that confirmed her feelings hadn't been merely vacation-induced. "You're really here," she said as she hugged him tightly. "Did you doubt me?" Flynn asked, his voice warm against her ear. "Not you," Amelia replied honestly. "Just the situation. It seemed too perfect to be real." That weekend showed them both that what they had found in Venice could indeed translate to real life. Flynn fit seamlessly into her world, expressing genuine interest in her cramped university office with its stacks of research materials, engaging thoughtfully with her colleagues at a department dinner, and seeming perfectly content to spend Sunday morning at her favorite local cafe rather than at some five-star restaurant. "What are you thinking?" he asked as they walked through Boston Common, the fall leaves creating a canvas of color around them. "That I'm waiting for the catch," Amelia admitted. "The part where you reveal you're actually a secret agent, or have a hidden family somewhere, or are only interested in American citizenship." Flynn laughed. "Sadly, I'm exactly what I appear to be, a workaholic CEO with a glass obsession who fell hard for a brilliant professor after fishing her out of a Venetian canal." "When you put it that way, it still sounds improbable." "The best things often are," he replied, pulling her close for a kiss that drew smiles from passing strangers. Over the next 3 months, they established a rhythm that defied conventional long-distance relationship challenges. Flynn's regular business travel to New York meant they rarely went more than 2 weeks without seeing each other. When in different countries, they maintained connection through daily video calls and messages. In November, Amelia traveled to Venice for a long weekend to continue work on the exhibition. The trip reinforced what she already knew, that Flynn Benetti was extraordinary not just in his business acumen or his artistic talent, but in his fundamental decency. She watched him mentor young apprentices, negotiate fairly with suppliers, and maintain the family-like atmosphere that made Benetti different from its corporate competitors. December brought Flynn to Boston for Christmas, his first visit lasting longer than a weekend. They decorated Amelia's apartment together, attended faculty holiday parties, and established new traditions that blended their separate lives. "Move in with me," Flynn said on Christmas Eve as they sat before her small tree, the lights casting a warm glow across the room. Amelia blinked in surprise. "To Venice?" "Eventually, yes. But I was thinking we could start with you having a place in my New York apartment. I'm there often enough that we could see each other weekly instead of monthly." His eyes held hers steadily. "I'm not asking you to give up your career, Amelia. Just to consider how we might bring our lives closer together." The proposal was so practical, so considerate of her circumstances, that Amelia found herself agreeing before she'd fully processed all the implications. "We could try it," she said cautiously. "See how it works with me spending some weekends in New York." Flynn's smile was worth any logistical challenges the arrangement might bring. "That's all I'm asking for now, a step forward." January and February proved the wisdom of their compromise. Amelia maintained her teaching schedule in Boston, but spent most weekends in New York, where Flynn's spacious apartment in a pre-war building near Central Park became a second home. She established a small workspace in his guest room, bringing research materials and gradually leaving more personal items with each visit. By March, as the anniversary exhibition planning intensified, they had settled into a routine that felt remarkably sustainable. Flynn had even begun exploring potential partnerships with museums and universities in the Boston area, laying groundwork for a possible Benetti expansion that might allow him to spend more time there. "You do that?" Amelia asked when he mentioned the possibility. Expand your business just to be near me. I'd be doing it anyway, Flynn replied pragmatically. The American market is important to us. But yes, the location choice is influenced by a certain art historian I happen to be in love with. It was the first time he'd said the words directly, though his actions had been declaring it for months. Amelia's breath caught. You love me, Flynn's expression softened. Of course I do. I thought that was fairly obvious by now. I love you too, Amelia said, the words feeling both monumental and completely natural. April brought Amelia back to Venice for spring break, this time staying in Flynn's apartment rather than a hotel. The week was divided between exhibition work and deeper integration into Flynn's life, meeting his extended family, being introduced to his closest friends, and experiencing Venice not as a visitor, but as someone connected to its fabric through the man she loved. On her last evening, Flynn took her to Burano, the colorful island known for its lace-making tradition and rainbow-hued houses. They dined at a tiny restaurant where the owner embraced Flynn like a son, then walked along quiet canals as the sunset painted the colored houses in even more vibrant hues. I wanted to bring you here, Flynn said as they paused beside a particularly vibrant blue building, because this place represents what I believe about tradition and beauty. These houses have been painted these colors for centuries. Fishermen used them to find their way home through the fog. Practical necessity became cultural heritage, became art. It's perfect, Amelia said, understanding why this place would resonate with him. Flynn took both her hands in his expression suddenly serious. When I pulled you from that sinking gondola last summer, I had no idea I was actually saving myself. Before you, I was all about preserving the past and securing the future, but rarely fully present in my own life. Amelia's heart began to race as Flynn reached into his pocket and dropped to one knee. You've taught me to see both my work and my life with new eyes, he continued, opening a small velvet box to reveal a ring unlike any Amelia had ever seen, a platinum band supporting what appeared to be a perfect droplet of Venetian glass, with colors that shifted like the lagoon itself as it caught the light. The glass is made using a technique from the 16th century, Flynn explained, his voice slightly unsteady. Rediscovered from those manuscripts we viewed together. It contains actual gold and silver particles that create the color shifts, a technique once thought lost forever. Tears pricked at Amelia's eyes as he continued. I want to build a life with you, Amelia Evans, one that honors both our passions and creates something new and beautiful between us. Will you marry me? Yes, she whispered, then more strongly, yes, absolutely yes. As Flynn slid the ring onto her finger and rose to kiss her, cheers erupted from nearby. Amelia looked up to see several of the restaurant staff and a few locals watching from windows and doorways, all smiling broadly. Did you plan that? She asked with a laugh as Flynn held her close. In Venice, privacy is a relative concept, he replied, grinning. But no, I think our audience is spontaneous, though I did tell Mario we might have something to celebrate tonight. They returned to the restaurant where champagne appeared instantly, and toasts were offered in rapid Italian that Amelia was only beginning to understand. The genuine joy of these relative strangers moved her deeply, another reminder of how Flynn had created a life built on real connections rather than mere transactions. Back in Flynn's apartment later that night, they began discussing practical matters: where they would live, how they would balance their careers, when the wedding might be. I've been thinking about this, Flynn said, pulling her close on the terrace overlooking the Grand Canal. What if we split our time? Summers and part of fall in Venice when Benetti is busiest and you're on academic break. Winter and spring primarily in Boston, with me commuting to Venice as needed. You do that? Amelia asked, surprised at how neatly the solution addressed her concerns. The company has excellent management, Flynn said. And modern technology means I don't need to be physically present for everything. Besides, he added with a smile, Venice has inspired artists for centuries. Perhaps it's time I brought a little of that inspiration to the academic world of Boston. Over the following months, they put their plan into action. Flynn began the process of establishing a Benetti design studio in Boston, while Amelia arranged for a research sabbatical that would allow her to spend extended time in Venice working on the anniversary exhibition. They were married in September, exactly 1 year after their first meeting. The ceremony took place in a small church near the Benetti workshops, followed by a reception on Murano, where glassblowers created commemorative pieces for each guest. Amelia's parents and closest friends flew in from America, merging seamlessly with Flynn's extended Italian family and his network of employees who were treated as family. "Are you happy?" Flynn asked as they danced under the stars, the lights of Venice twinkling across the lagoon. "Completely," Amelia replied, the truth of it resonating through her. "Though I still sometimes can't believe that falling into a canal led to all this." "I've been thinking about that," Flynn said thoughtfully. "That gondola, it was from a new discount company. After I helped you, I had my team investigate. They were using substandard materials, taking shortcuts in construction." "What happened?" "We bought them out," Flynn said simply. "Retrained their craftsmen in proper techniques, integrated them into our restoration division. They're now making proper vessels that won't sink under tourists." Amelia laughed. "Of course you did. Turning disaster into opportunity, it's what you do best." "Not the best thing I've done," Flynn corrected, pulling her closer. "That was diving after a certain American professor who looked so beautiful even while dripping with canal water." "Romantic," Amelia teased. "But true," Flynn insisted. "Some people spend their whole lives waiting to be pulled from whatever they're drowning in. I'm just grateful I was there when you needed someone, and that you've been saving me right back ever since." As the celebration continued around them, Amelia reflected on the extraordinary journey from that moment of terror in a sinking gondola to this perfect night. She had come to Venice seeking beauty and history, never expecting to find a future. Now, with Flynn's arms around her and their life together just beginning, she understood that some accidents are actually destiny in disguise, and that sometimes being rescued is just the first step in discovering where you truly belong. Their first year of marriage unfolded as a beautiful integration of their separate worlds. True to their plan, they divided their time between Venice and Boston, creating homes that reflected both their personalities in each location. In Boston, Flynn's influence could be seen in the Murano glass fixtures and the small glass-blowing studio he installed in what had once been Amelia's spare bedroom. In Venice, Amelia's academic sensibilities emerged in the library she curated in Flynn's apartment, and the collection of rare art history texts that now stood alongside his family's business archives. The Benetti Anniversary exhibition opened to international acclaim, with Amelia's expertise evident in every carefully contextualized display. Critics praised the unprecedented approach to cultural exchange narratives, and several prestigious museums requested traveling versions of the exhibition. "This is your triumph," Flynn told her at the opening gala, where art historians and glass connoisseurs mingled with Benetti's master craftspeople. "It's our triumph," Amelia corrected. "Your vision, my research, they're inseparable now." As their second anniversary approached, They faced an unexpected challenge when Amelia was offered a prestigious endowed chair at Harvard, a career-defining opportunity that would require more consistent presence in Boston. "You should take it," Flynn said without hesitation when she showed him the offer letter. "But our our two-home approach. This would shift it considerably." Amelia worried. Flynn took her hands in his. "Remember when I said I wanted to establish more Benetti presence in America? This is the perfect catalyst. We'll adjust, adapt. That's what we do." With characteristic efficiency, Flynn accelerated his plans for the Boston design studio, transforming it into a more comprehensive American headquarters. By their second Christmas, as a married couple, they had settled into a rhythm that allowed Flynn to manage Benetti's global operations while being physically present in Boston for most of the academic year. The following spring brought their greatest adventure, yet the news that Amelia was pregnant. "A baby," Flynn breathed when she told him, his expression a mixture of wonder and joy. "Our own little glassblower. Or art historian," Amelia teased. "Or both," Flynn countered, pulling her into a celebratory embrace. Their daughter, Sophia, was born in Venice during the winter break of Amelia's second year at Harvard. With her father's blue eyes and her mother's auburn hair, she became the center of their world and the newest member of both the Benetti business family and Harvard's academic community. Flynn proved to be an exceptionally involved father, often wearing Sophia in a carrier while conducting business calls, or adjusting his schedule to ensure Amelia could maintain her teaching and research. Together, they modeled a partnership that defied conventional gender roles and geographical constraints. By Sophia's first birthday, they had established a new normal, one where their daughter experienced the richness of both American and Italian culture, where family meant both blood relations and the extended network of people connected to them through glass and art and shared purpose. "Do you ever regret it?" Amelia asked Flynn one evening as they sat on their terrace in Venice, watching the sunset while Sophia slept peacefully nearby. "The complications, the travel, the compromises." Flynn looked at her with the same intensity she'd first seen when he pulled her from the canal 3 years earlier. "Not for a single moment," he said firmly. "Some people live their entire lives in one place, following one path, and never find what we have. We've created something rare. Amelia, a life that's both rooted in tradition and completely our own design." As if to punctuate his words, Sophia stirred and made a small, contented sound in her sleep. "Besides," Flynn added with a smile, "imagine the story we'll tell her someday, how her father had to rescue her mother from a sinking gondola, never expecting that saving you would sink me so completely into love." Amelia leaned against him, her hand finding his as they gazed out over the waters that had brought them together. "The best kind of sinking there is," she murmured, knowing with absolute certainty that some accidents are actually the universe's most perfect plans. 5 years later, with Sophia now a precocious kindergartner and her brother Marco just learning to walk, Amelia and Flynn stood together on the same small bridge where they had shared their first kiss. The moonlight still danced on the canal below, and Venice continued its centuries-old dialogue between tradition and innovation, much like their marriage. "You remember what you said to me here?" Amelia asked, leaning into Flynn's embrace. "That I was in danger of falling for you," Flynn recalled with a smile. "Probably the biggest understatement of my life." "And I said it was a bold statement after just 2 days," Amelia laughed. "You were right to be cautious," Flynn acknowledged, "but I was right about us." As they kissed beneath the Venetian moon, their life together stretched before them not as separate worlds reluctantly bridged, but as a single, beautiful fusion of passions and purposes. as unique and enduring as the glass that had brought them together on that fateful day when a gondola sank and two hearts unexpectedly rose.